Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And thus far in the 2037 season, we've done a good job saving our defending world champion Oakland A's. At 53 and 27, we have the best record in baseball as we sit here on July 1st, 4.5 games ahead of the four-time division defending champion Texas Rangers in the division, and they are also the closest team to us for the best record in baseball as we sit here 80 games into this season. Ranked first out of 30 teams in the power rankings, and we've done this all despite having lost our best player, center fielder Jake Ortega, for the season a little bit over 2 weeks ago. So obviously, him being out the last 2 weeks isn't having a big impact on how we're playing on the field yet. We do have the young Sergio Palomares, who had been a reserve outfielder for us this year, now playing every day in center field when we sim ahead a few more days from now and get to our midseason review, which interestingly doesn't happen after 81 games in OOTP. I think it typically happens after 84 games. But we'll check in on Mr. Palomares then, do our annual mid-year review, and start planning for the upcoming draft and trade deadline. And then we'll end up simming ahead to the draft and find out who's going to be on the board for us when we get to make our first round selection before finishing up this episode. So we are really only going to sim ahead 10 more days until the first year player draft, but a lot that we're going to hopefully cover between now and then. But before we get to the mid-year review and getting ready for the draft, as many of you know, I am a fan of both the New York Yankees and the New York Jets. And as I begin this episode, it's about half an hour before game time for the ALCS between the Yankees and the Guardians. So by the time this episode is complete, the Yankees-Guardians game will certainly be started. Probably will finish this episode before the Jets Monday night matchup against the Buffalo Bills has started, but I won't be posting this episode until tomorrow morning, early on Tuesday morning, so definitely a high probability that what I say right now will come back to bite me and can be used against me. But I'll let you know what I'm thinking about those teams that I follow in the real world. And clearly, with the Yankees, you have to be feeling confident that they're going to make it to the World Series this year. Cleveland, the second best team in the American League this season. So by no means am I viewing the Guardians as a pushover. But if you look at the Yankees roster, they've certainly got better hitters. If you look at the starting pitching, although I'm not in love with the Yankees starting pitching, I think it is better than what the Guardians bring. I think the Guardians bullpen is certainly better, and we've seen their rookie manager, Stephen Vaught, use that pretty effectively over the first round of the playoffs. And I think defensively, you could probably argue that the Guardians are a better team there. But when you look at the sum of the parts, you look at the payroll that the Yankees have compared to the payroll of the Guardians, and the Yankees should be and are favorites in the series, and I'm hoping that they're going to make it to their first World Series in 15 years. It's hard to imagine. I grew up when the Yankees were in their World Series drought from 81 till 96. Those were my formative years that took me from elementary schooler through junior high, through high school, through college, and then out into the real world for years until they finally broke that 15-year streak without being in the World Series. And it's hard to believe that here is a grown man well into middle age that we're at a 15-year drought right here. And if the Yankees don't win this ALCS, the drought will be even longer than the one I experienced when I was younger, which is kind of shocking given that the Yankees over the past 15 years have generally been a very good and very competitive team, as opposed to some of the teams I grew up with, which were in a large part, many seasons, it was rooting for Donnie baseball and not much else to get excited about. I don't love Carlos Rodon on the mound tonight, but it is what it is. And I know that sounds like a Yankees problem, a guy who is very highly paid, very accomplished major leaguer who won 16 games this year with an ERA below 4 feels like a pretty solid game one starter. But Rodon, in his limited postseason experience, has been disastrous. I hope he proves me wrong. I think if it's a tough game for us tonight, it's going to be because the Guardians are able to score some runs. Do feel that hopefully Judge and to a lesser extent Soto break out of poor to mediocre performances for them in the ALDS in this series. I think if those two get going, there could be no stopping the Yankees, and we'll be finding out in the next few hours. And we'll turn now to my New York Jets, who are pretty much the opposite of the New York Yankees in terms of their historic success. Although I've talked about the long streaks the Yankees have had without making it to the World Series during my life, they still do have 7 World Championships over the course of my life, whereas the New York Jets have only one in Super Bowl III with Joe Namath, and I was not around for that one. So no World Championships for the Jets in my life. I've seen them go to 4 AFC Championship games, losing all 4, following the 82, 98, 09, and 2010 seasons. That 2010 season was the last time the Jets went to the playoffs. As is well known, they have the longest streak in the 4 major American or North American professional sports of not being in the postseason. We're hoping to change that this year with an expensive veteran roster led by Aaron Rodgers, and fired their coach Robert Saleh less than a week ago after a 2-3 start. Huge game tonight on Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills. If the Jets lose this game, they are 2-4 and a dumpster fire, at least according to the media. If they win this game, they'll be 3-3, and they'll be in first place in the AFC East by virtue of having the tiebreaker over the Bills, who will fall to 3-3. And the move to replace Saleh as head coach and Nathaniel Hackett as offensive coordinator and play caller over the past week will be brilliant moves, at least for a day or two. So a lot on the line for the Jets tonight also. What am I expecting from the game? I think they need to run more than they have. Breece Hall and Braylon Allen are both pretty talented running backs, although we haven't necessarily seen it this year, particularly from Breece Hall. The play calling has been pretty predictable. I'm hoping Todd Downing will change that up, although my friends who are Titans fans have warned me to not get too excited about what Mr. Downing may do, but at least it's a different voice for the offense, a different voice in Aaron Rodgers' ear. If the Jets can establish the running game, feel like they can win this game against the Bills, and all will be well in the Jets world for a couple of days. I think the offense is the question. I don't think the Bills are going to score a ton of points tonight. Obviously, that's always risky to say when you are up against a dynamic player like Josh Allen who can hurt you with his arm, hurt you with his legs, hurt you with his strength. But I have a fair amount of confidence in the Jets offense, the Jets defense. So to me, it just comes down to whether the offense will produce. If we see a good running game, should make things easier for Aaron Rodgers in the passing attack. I'd love it to be a high-scoring game. I'd love the Jets to go out and score 35, 38 points, not necessarily expecting that. But I think if they can establish the running game, I think their defense will do enough that they can get a W tonight against Buffalo. And we'll know 4 or 5 hours from now how poor that prediction ended up. And I'm sure some of you will let me know about it in the comments to this episode. And with that, it's time to start moving forward for our mid-season review of the team and getting ready for this 2037 draft. We're finally in a position where outside of Jake Ortega, the team is getting healthy, and hopefully we can keep that going. And any deals that we do decide to do over this course of July before we get to the trade deadline will hopefully be done from a position of strength rather than desperation. And we've gotten to our mid-season review with Mr. Fisher. 82 games is the mid-season review, 55-27 record after we've won the first couple games of the month of July against the Yankees. Obviously, he's very pleased with our team record. He wanted us to make the playoffs this year, so we seem well on the way to do that. Doesn't see any improvement at catcher. Wants us to add an MVP, so we are not doing well with either of those goals. Luis Godina is now the highest rated prospect on our team. Looking at number 24 overall ranking, and Godina is a guy who made his move to A-ball this year, putting up a 157 WRC plus in his first 65 at-bats as a 20-year-old, soon to be 21-year-old. Certainly would expect to see him progress to high A in very short order, and perhaps double A in the not too distant future. He was an IAFA signing for us about 4.5 years ago. Mr. Godina, a guy we signed for only $170,000, so he was a supplemental player that year. And he's developed into a guy who we think could have a pretty impressive bat for a middle infielder. Still kind of need to figure out where we ultimately want to play him. Could end up being more of a left fielder than anything else. 6'3", he could also be a first baseman. If he fully develops his bat, that might not be the worst situation in the world. But looking at the scouting for him, back when we picked him up in early 2033, we kind of thought he was a 2.5-star potential guy, and he had a lot of work to do to potentially reach his ceiling. These days, he's done a fair amount of that work to reach his ceiling, and in some cases, his ceiling is higher than we even imagined. So a lot of positive development thus far from Mr. Godina, who could become a big part of our future. He's happy that we've been restocking our farm system a bit. Happy that we're finally making some progress in terms of fan interest. He's good with our progress towards goals. Delighted with our overall performance. So although Mr. Fisher remains relatively stingy in terms of the finances, he's at least pleased with how we have been performing. And having played just 2 games since we checked in at the end of the last episode on our team statistics, not surprisingly, no significant changes. Still have the most runs scored in the American League, still have the fewest runs allowed in the American League. We are first or second in most offensive categories, and we are first, second, or third in most pitching categories. Real good defense as well. And as good as the 55-27 record is, we've actually underperformed expectations by a couple of games. We've won at least 17 games every month of the season so far, and off to a undefeated start here in the very early going in July. And the pitching, as we just touched upon, has been excellent this year. Jackson Ferris, our ace, banged up a little bit, but a 7-2 record with a 3.07 ERA. 85 strikeouts in just 73 innings pitched, a year after he'd led the American League in strikeouts per 9 innings. ERA plus and FIP minus, both above average and well above average in the case of his ERA plus, and a 1.2 WAR on the season. Certainly getting expensive as our highest paid player. He's heading into his last potentially year and a half with us. Going to be making $24 million next year. He does now have 10-5 rights, so that may make it a little trickier if we decide to move on from him after this season. But given that we are trying to win it all right now, no thoughts at all about getting rid of Ferris until this offseason at the earliest. Chase Dora, who we picked up in a big trade with Cincinnati last year around this time. Only a 5-5 record, but a 3.57 ERA, 1.7 WAR on the season, 120 ERA plus, 88 FIP minus. He's doing a really nice job for us as our number 2 starter, and we got Cincinnati to retain a big chunk of his contract for the next few seasons, part of the reason that we pulled off that deal. Jesus Saldana, the international free agent signing from 2032, is looking like a potential rookie of the year. We've already signed him to a long extension, off to a 9-3 start with a 1.84 ERA in his first 16 games in the majors. So he is a prospect who we signed as a teen, who has come up through our organization and performing incredibly well for us so far. Kevin Patterson, the veteran, now our number 4 starter, 6-4 with a 4.06 ERA, WAR of 0.7 on the year. And Bobby Garland recently added back into the rotation. He took over as our 5th starter a year ago and did really well. 5-0 this year with a 3.18 ERA. Taking a look at what he has done as a starter in 6 games, he's 4-0 with a 3.06 ERA. So he continues to be a very reliable player for us, although his WAR is only replacement level this season. Moving on to our bullpen, the results have been a little more mixed there. The controversial Camden Reisinger, who we signed to a 1-year deal, 2-2 record and 16 saves, but a 4.50 ERA over 22 innings pitched. He's walked 12, basically been a replacement level pitcher, slightly below average in terms of his ERA plus and his FIP minus. When we brought Reisinger on board, he had pretty consistently been an excellent pitcher over the course of his major league career. That's not what we've gotten from him this year. And given his fragility and his negative influence in the clubhouse, if he doesn't turn things around soon, it's not inconceivable that we could look to make many viewers happy and perhaps move on from Reisinger. Jason DeCaro had been our 5th starter until the last several weeks, now moved into a co-closer role with Reisinger as we're trying to continue to benefit from that captain personality. 6-5 record with 1 save, 5.40 ERA over 68 1/3 innings for DeCaro this season. Taking a look at his pitching stats, and he has not been effective in his 4 times in the bullpen thus far with an ERA of close to 8 over 5 2/3 innings. Struck out 9, but also allowed 9 hits, including a home run. So there's been a lot of action, both as a starter and a reliever this year for Mr. DeCaro. Doug Weiss, who I know many of you would like to see in the rotation, has been our stopper this year, basically pitched as many innings as DeCaro and Garland, who have both been our fifth starters over the course of the year. Weiss has been a revelation in that stopper role for us. 40 games pitched, a 4-1 record, 10 saves, 12 holds, and very impressive with 17 shutdowns and just 3 meltdowns. ERA of barely over 2, striking out 10 batters through 9 innings, and he's put up a team best among pitchers, 3.1 WAR for us, so doing a fantastic job for us there. Kamani O'Banner, not as good this year as he was a year ago. The ERA is ballooned by almost 2 to 5.52. That being said, seems like he's probably gotten a little bit unlucky, as his Sierra is a pretty strong 2.75, but overall he's been below replacement level for us as a setup man. The lefty R.J. Cope has pitched only 16 2/3 innings over 18 games. As usual, he's been pretty effective in the limited action that he has seen for us. Chuck Huntley, left-handed rookie, made the jump from Double-A all the way to the majors this year, and he's put up a 3.75 ERA while striking out just over a batter per inning for us as a solid lefty arm out of the pen at 22 years old. Mike Curtis finally having the type of season we hoped he would when we picked him up a couple of years ago. 1.43 ERA this year and no home runs allowed with 43 strikeouts and 37 2/3 innings. Been a win above replacement for us as a middle reliever. And Jonathan Shearer is in our long relief role right now. The rookie has pitched 9 innings over 6 games since we called him up. Allowed 2 earned runs, 9 hits, 8 strikeouts, and 1 home run in the limited action that we've seen from the 23-year-old. So between Saldana, Garland, Weiss, Huntley, and Shearer, we've got a pretty good crew of young pitchers who have come up through our organization who are on our major league roster at this point. Feeling real good about the pitching staff overall. Feel like with guys like DeCaro, Weiss, and O'Banner on the major league roster, we've got depth if we do have any injuries in the starting rotation going forward. I think the really big question for us is, do we keep Reisinger around for the long term, or do we look to move on from him over the next 30 days or so before we get to the trade deadline? Turning to the everyday players, the left-handed reliever R.J. Cope is technically a two-way player, although we very rarely use him in that way. 0 for 4 this year with 3 strikeouts in the limited action that he's seen. He did hit the first home run of his career last season for us, but a 167 hitter in his 18 career major league at-bats. Catcher, as you know from the mid-season review, is a position that ownership has asked us to improve this year. We are running Ackley and Boakai back for the 3rd straight year. Ackley hitting just .213 this year with a 67 WRC plus. Does have 5 homers and 21 ribbies and 202 at-bats, but he just hasn't become the offensive player that we hoped he might. When we signed him to an extension as a relatively unproven guy. Still a very good defensive catcher, and he's put up a 0.4 WAR for us this year. His backup, Jaden Boakai, a little better thanks to his strong defense, half a win above replacement for him. He is an 85 WRC plus, hitting .218, but does have 4 homers in 87 at-bats. So neither one lighting it up all that much offensively. May look to go into more of a pure platoon, or I guess more accurately, since they're both right-handed hitters, pure timeshare between Ackley and Boakai. Right now, Ackley's playing 2 out of every 3 days, but given that Ackley hasn't really proven to be a better hitter than Boakai, even though on paper he should be, might try to get Boakai and his good defense in there a little more often. Clearly, if there was a big-time catcher available on the trade market, might be something for us to consider, but only if the price is right. Colt Keith, the veteran first baseman, had some injury issues this year, but he is hitting .270 with 4 homers and 15 ribbies, 9 doubles, and 115 at-bats, and a 114 WRC+. So playing only or starting only against right-handed pitching, but the veteran has contributed while he's been in the lineup. Speaking of contributing, our DH Juan Ramos has played every day for us this year once again. .287 average, 23 homers, and 70 ribbies. Year after leading the American League in ribbies, he's in the chase to lead the AL in home runs and or ribbies again this year with a 149 WRC+. So a great performance from Ramos. Steve Allison, utility infielder, has actually started 43 games for us this year because of some injuries, most notably to Alejandro Landin, our second baseman, hitting just .224 with an 83 WRC+, but with his versatile glove and the fact that he does have 12 doubles, hasn't been completely useless offensively and has put up more than half a win above replacement for us. Alejandro Landin, the second baseman, also has started 43 games, exactly the same as his backup, Mr. Allison. Landin, when he's been healthy and in the lineup, has been as good as ever, hitting .312, 9 homers and 33 ribbies and 157 at-bats, 156 WRC+, and a 2.3 WAR for the former IAFA signing, who has definitely lived up to expectations. Rodney Mesidor has taken over as our everyday third baseman this year, and it's been pretty disappointing. .220 average, 7 homers and 31 ribbies and 255 at-bats, just a 65 WRC+. His decent glove means he's been slightly above replacement level, but third base to me is the most obvious position on this team where we could look for an upgrade. Shortstop Andy Toribio got off to a incredibly fast start in his career with us, and the last couple years he's been more of an average offensive player. Still a lot of value thanks to his good glove and some pretty good speed, but not as dynamic offensively as we may have hoped. Hitting .245 this year, does have 20 doubles, 11 homers, and 11 steals. 94 WRC+, exactly the same as a year ago, and about a win and a half above replacement for the fan favorite. Turning to our outfielders, and I know some of you are going to be disappointed with this, but when we brought up Federico Aldana when Mr. Ortega suffered his season-ending injury with the shuffling around to get some playing time for Sergio Palomares at center fielder, Luis Taveras, who's been playing only against left-handed pitching for us the last few years, and some of you wanted to see in the everyday lineup where he was for a while, is now our utility outfielder and the only guy in the outfield who's not starting anywhere. We wanted to give playing time to Federico Aldana against left-handed pitching. He was dominant down in AAA, and he's actually been pretty good in his first 7 games in the majors. 3 homers and 8 ribbies and 23 at-bats, a 163 WRC+. Got more home run pop, particularly against left-handed pitching, than Mr. Taveras does. So the minor league signing out of Cuba this past offseason, getting an opportunity to play for us against left-handed pitching rather than Taveras recently. Andy Brailovsky is perhaps on pace to win a batting title and get some MVP votes this year, hitting .329, 15 homers, 55 ribbies, a 160 WRC+, and he's already put up a 3.4 WAR for us. He's moved from first base to left field to ensure that we can get both Mr. Keith and Mr. Ramos in the lineup on a regular basis. Although he's not great defensively in left field, the bat certainly makes up for it. Luis Taveras has had some opportunities to play more this year. 182 at-bats, 48 games started, although he's not starting right now, as we talked about. Hitting 280, 17 doubles, 4 homers, and 20 ribbies in 182 at-bats, so a lot of good extra base power for him. 129 WRC plus and a 1.4 WAR. Taking a look at his batting splits, and he continues to outperform, much better against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching again this year, even though he is a right-handed hitter. And his splits look very even as far as where we think his skills are. We'll have to see what Sergio Palomares has been doing, because Aldana, who's off to a nice start, and Palomares, who's taken over in center field for Ortega, are the big reasons that Taveras is not starting more regularly. Palomares, the former IAFA signing from 2029, off to a pretty good start in his first full season in the majors. He's got 100 at-bats at this point, hitting 290, 6 doubles, a triple, and a homer, 9 for 9 stealing bases. He's put up a 125 WRC plus, and it was a win above replacement. If he can continue to put up that type of offense with some good speed and decent range in the outfield, he's certainly not going to be Jake Ortega. Might not hit for quite the same average as Ortega, and certainly isn't going to have the same home run power as Ortega. But Gravedigger Palomares for a contingency plan in center field, doing pretty well. And Arturo Uresti, his first full year in the majors, hitting 300 in 277 at-bats, 15 doubles, 4 triples, 8 homers, 50 runs batted in already, a 143 WRC plus, and a 2.4 WAR. So our offense has been a struggle for us many years in this playthrough, given our relatively low budget. But at this point, with technically 4 guys in the outfield, everyone except Brailovsky is a homegrown guy for us at this point, essentially. Although Aldana, granted, we talked, just signed him out of Cuba to a minor league contract, but we are his Major League Baseball affiliation. The outfield, incredibly productive thus far this year, even without Jake Ortega being in the lineup. So Taveras remains a bit of an odd man out, but I don't know exactly who I would play him over at this point, given that everyone else in the outfield has also been pretty productive. And Taveras at 28 years old is actually as old as any of them as well. So as I think about this team at the midway point of the season, maybe we make a move with Reisinger in the bullpen. Maybe we make a move at catcher. Maybe we make a move at third base. Other than that, there's not a lot that I would change, other than wishing that Jake Ortega was healthy. But that's not going to happen. If you have any thoughts and suggestions on what we should do as we approach the trade deadline, I would love to hear those in the comments. And obviously, before we finish the episode, as I talked about, we'll be previewing the draft and outlining some options there, and always helpful to hear from the Worldwide Scouting Department on that front as well. And we're off to a nice 4-1 start for the month of July as we approach draft day. Second baseman Alejandro Landin, just named the AL Player of the Week, batted .448 with 4 homers and 9 ribbies. As we talked about, he's having another really big season for us. Not as much home run power and ribbies as he's had in previous years, but the batting average is .325, and to be fair, he's done what he has done in 169 at-bats, so I actually kind of misspoke there. If he had played another 35 games or so, his home run and ribby figures would probably be right on pace to what he's done historically, if not even maybe a little better. And we've simmed ahead to draft day, still continue to play very well. A 60-29 record for the Oakland A's. 6.5 games up on the Rangers in the AL West as we try to end their stranglehold on the division. Still have the best record in all of baseball. And at this point, our closest opposition is the Padres at 55-35, so they're 5.5 games worse than us. In the AL, the Royals at 53-34 have gotten by the Rangers. They're only 6 games behind us for the best record in the AL. So very well positioned. Brailovsky third in the batting race. Ramos tied for the lead in homers, second in ribbies at this point. And Doug Weiss, the stopper, third in the American League with a 3.4 pitcher WAR as we get ready for this draft. And I guess the good news about the fact that we ended up losing out in the final 2 games of the year last season to the Rangers in the division is that despite the fact we're defending World Series champions, we'll be picking 26th this year, so probably not going to have the bluest of the blue chip talent on the board for us with that 26th pick. But let's get the draft going here and see who's going to be available and on the board for us. And it looks like there's probably 4 pitchers and 8 position players that we will talk about before finishing up the episode and previewing things. Conceivably could end up going in a different direction from one of these guys, but tend to think one of them will probably be the direction we end up going. Taking a look at the pitching, Chris Jensen is the most accomplished and most far along of any of the college players in this year's draft as far as the pitchers. Also his decent potential. 22-year-old starting pitching prospect Sourface out of Grambling has pretty good stamina, okay at holding on runners. Potential 4-pitch arsenal, although he's got some work to do on that changeup. Throws in the mid to high 90s, extreme ground ball tendencies, high loyalty, adaptability, and intelligence. We think his stuff and his control probably can be around major league average, maybe a little better in terms of the stuff with good movement on his pitches. Only looking for $1.6 million. Certainly if we want someone who's closer to being able to help us at the major league level, Sourface Jensen may be a player to consider. Another starting pitching prospect, Kevin Zamudio, 18-year-old out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. Mixed personality traits, decent stamina, awful at holding on runners. If that changeup and splitter develop, could have a 4-pitch arsenal. Think his stuff and his movement could be well above average. Gonna likely struggle with the walks over the course of his career. Not looking for a lot of money for the 18-year-old right-hander. Another right-hander, Kamani Higgins, out of Laredo, Texas. Solid stamina, excellent at holding on runners. Going to struggle to have 3 high-quality major league pitches. His stuff is going to be the potential issue, although we do think it could get a bit above average. Average movement, average control on his pitches. Looks like he's not going to allow the ball to be hit out of the ballpark if he reaches his full potential, but batters are still going to somewhat paradoxically make pretty good contact against him. Interesting prospect as well, with him looking for $1.7 million, which is more than either Zamudio or Jensen. My thought is I'd probably go with one of those guys. The highest rated pitching prospect in terms of his potential is unfortunately a reliever, Joe Heilman. Low stamina, low holding on runners, but the 18-year-old's fastball is not far off major league quality, already touching 3 digits on the radar gun at the age of 18. We think his stuff could be absolutely filthy, average movement and below average control if he reaches what we think his ceiling is at this point, but those things can certainly change. He's committed to Louisiana Tech. As interesting as Heilman's stuff is, my inclination, if we went with a pitcher, is it will probably be Zamudio or Jensen. Scouting director recommends a center fielder who we'll be talking about shortly, but we'll see if we were to go with a pitcher, he recommends the high schooler Kevin Zamudio over Chris Jensen. And I mentioned earlier that there were 8 everyday players we'll talk about before finishing up the episode. They're the 8 players that our scout thinks has 4-star or higher potential. Start with the center fielder, Greg Stockwell. Switch hitting center fielder, pretty good speed, decent outfield range, although his skills are not exceptional out there. Potentially an excellent contact hitter with good gap power, decent home run power, and an average eye. Certainly looks like he could be an interesting player and not looking for a ton of money. Another center fielder, 17-year-old Steve Neal out of Great Falls, Montana. Looks more like a right fielder to me than a center fielder. Another guy with decent speed, more of a well-balanced profile. Contact not quite as good, but more home run power. Also a potentially average eye. Good work ethic, although he's got low leadership. I think these guys are both decent prospects, but hopefully there'll be someone a bit more interesting for us to pursue. Jadavian Minich, a shortstop. Like the high adaptability and work ethic, decent speed, not the greatest defensive infielder I've ever seen. Could also play a decent corner outfield. Has the best home run power of the players that we've looked at so far. Digger Minich, certainly an interesting prospect. I don't know if I'm in love with him. Left-handed hitting middle infielder, though. Certainly some merit to think about him. Another shortstop, Edgar Hermosillo, 18-year-old out of the Big Apple. Also pretty solid speed, high loyalty and work ethic, low financial ambition, respectable defensively, even though he's only 18 years old. Another guy with a really interesting home run power, decent contact. The gap power and the ability to draw walks a bit of a concern, but certainly someone we should at least think about. And the last of the 4-star prospects is a 21-year-old college player, Greg Grace, out of Florida State University. The best speed of anyone we've looked at so far. Probably the best defensive outfielder overall of everyone we've seen thus far. Potentially really good contact and excellent gap power with decent home run power and a decent eye. He's already got 40 contact and 40 gap power, a little further along, obviously, than the high school players. Not someone who I think would be making an impact for us immediately, but Mr. Magnificent, if he reached his full potential, could certainly contribute to the strength that we currently have in the outfield. But we haven't talked about the 3 most highly regarded prospects among position players, at least according to our scout yet. The most expensive is the shortstop Jorge Quijada out of Pocatello, Idaho, looking for $7.5 million. Some negative personality traits, high financial ambition, low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic. Like that 65 range in the infield. He's actually the least fleet of foot of anyone we've looked at, but a very well-balanced bat potentially. If he reaches his full potential, he's pretty much above average in everything. Got a lot of work to do to develop that home run power, but he is only 17 years old. The right-handed hitting shortstop who's committed to the Metropolitan State University of Denver is going to certainly require more than slot to come join us. Tyrell Mauch, 18-year-old center fielder out of Dallas, fragile physically, not particularly good instincts on the base paths or bunting-wise, pretty average corner outfielder. The attraction with him is his ability to hit the long ball, potentially world-class home run power, and the ability to draw a ton of walks to go with decent contact and decent gap power. He's committed to the college baseball powerhouse Vanderbilt, who also recently proved to be, at least for 1 week, a college football power when they beat the Alabama Crimson Tide a week ago. But the left-handed hitting Tyrell Mock, different profile than anyone we've looked at, only looking for $2.2 million. And the guy that our scout recommends and the highest rated player on his board is the center fielder Steve Payne, 18-year-old out of Excelsior, Minnesota, looking for about $7 million. Good range, good speed, and potentially outstanding home run power and excellent gap power to go with a decent eye. The question with him is his ability to make contact and how many strikeouts he's going to have. But the left-handed hitting Payne certainly has some things that are very attractive. You look at that combination of home run power, speed, and good range in the outfield, and can see why he's high on some people's boards. Before we finish up, we'll take a quick look at the mock draft just to see where some of the players we've talked about were expected to go. And it doesn't look like there's too many who we've talked about who were expected to be off the board at this point. We're expected to go with Tyrell Mock, the outfielder that we just talked about. Quijada expected to go in a couple picks. Steve Payne not long after that. And then it looks like a lot of the other players that we've talked about expected to slip into the second round. Jadavion Minich, the shortstop who we talked about, 4-star potential player, is projected to be our pick in the second round. Could be pretty good value at that point. I really don't know if he's actually going to be around there, but that would be kind of interesting if he was. And we'll also check out where the two pitchers we were interested in, Zamudio and Jensen, are projected to go. Some of you may have seen where they were. I haven't noticed it yet looking at this live with all of you. Are they really both dropping to the third round? I have a feeling I must have missed something here. I'm sure some of you are yelling at me now, hey, idiot, didn't you see them in the second round? Although Chris Jensen, wow. Whew, that's interesting. The pitcher out of Grambling, who's the closest to Major League ready of anyone in the draft, is projected to go in the fourth round, 16th pick overall to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, we have seen in recent drafts that it seems like with the college pitchers in particular, the projections of the mock draft are oftentimes far underestimating how soon they're going to be picked. But certainly would be very interesting value to be able to get a guy like Jensen in, say, the second or third round rather than the first round. Don't know that that's what I'm going to do. I think if he's my favorite player on the board, it probably makes sense to go with him and take the bird in hand while we have the chance. But if I ultimately have him in a mix with 3 or 4 other guys that I really like or that the worldwide scouting department likes, maybe we can be a little more patient with Mr. Jensen. And it's interesting to know that I didn't miss anything because with the last pick in the 5th round, that's where the high school pitcher Kevin Zamudio is expected to go. So the two pitchers that I like the most in this draft projected to go in the 4th and the 5th round. I don't know that I would be patient enough to wait and make that happen, but if we could get them even 2 rounds earlier, if we got Jensen in the 2nd and Zamudio in the 3rd, which according to the mock draft doesn't seem impossible, and we went with whichever position player we thought was the best in the first round. That could be a pretty interesting approach to take. But again, I feel like if there's someone who I ultimately think is a clear-cut number one, there's also an argument to not get too cute and to just go with that guy. But certainly looks like there might be some value in the pitchers if we decide to wait. If you've got thoughts on what we should do in the draft, if you've got thoughts on what we should do as we approach the trade deadline, always helpful to hear what you're thinking. And we'll find out over the next few hours how my Yankees and my Jets do this evening. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.